I'm Isaac Marion, author of the New York Times bestselling Warm Bodies series, and I live in a shed. Yes, the Outer Edge Outpost is a 10 by 20 foot box with 7 of those feet for tools and 13 for living. There are a lot of things I love about the shed life, and a lot of things I do not. I'm not out here entirely by choice, and I'll tell you that story later. For now, I just want to answer your one burning question. If you write a hugely popular novel that gets translated into 27 languages and adapted into a hit film with Nicholas Hoult and John Malkovich that still hits top 5 on Netflix and regularly shows up on Jeopardy, how glamorous is your life? This is my bathroom. Let's back up a little. 3 years ago, I was living in a beautiful log cabin on a Washington coast island, a lush PNW paradise that, despite being remote and rural, was still rich with culture and crawling with earnest progressives. So obviously, it was expensive as hell. I've been coasting on Warm Bodies money for a long time, watching the pile shrink a little more every year, occasionally replenishing with book sales or freelance work, but steadily trending downward. One day I did some math and realized this whole pristine liberal Eden thing wasn't going to work out for me much longer. Also, it was kind of starting to annoy me. I grew up in small towns with religious fanatics and far right-wingers. Then I moved to Seattle in my early 20s and spent 2 decades embracing the other side. But the pandemic years really brought out the worst in people all across the spectrum. I saw a lot of ugliness and absurdity in the culture I'd been trying to live in, and my dreams of ever really belonging to it started to dwindle. When my dad died suddenly in 2021, the last of my patience for fussy idealists burned into hard black bark. So I sold my cabin and used the cash to buy 20 acres of empty land in eastern Washington. Would I find any more sense of belonging in truck and Trump country? Probably not, but at least it's cheap, and they'll let you live in a shed. Eastern Washington has always felt like freedom to me. I do still have some love for Western Washington, but it's a crowded, noisy, traffic-clogged little strip of land, swarming with tech industry termites devouring all the resources, where trees and clouds choke out the sun, and where my last wad of cash would have bought me a tiny rectangle of dirt, walled in by strangers on all sides, with regulators demanding that I build a 2-bedroom home or die. I wanted space. I wanted sky. I wanted to be left alone. And with the loss of my dad still fresh, feeling like I no longer had a place in this unraveling culture, I kind of wanted to disappear. Not to literally die, but just to lie down in the dry, clean dust and let the roaring desert sun rip apart my atoms and release me back into the cloud. So I bought this land, and I got a well drilled, punching 500 feet down into the mountain to pull up ancient water that has never touched the modern world. Amazingly, there was street power on this remote dirt road, and as much as I love the idea of powering my life with the sun, I couldn't justify the cost and complexity of a year-round solar battery system when there was unlimited power a few hundred feet away. So yes, I do have grid power, but I feel like for most people, the term off-grid is less about electrical technicalities and more about the lifestyle, being so far away from civilization that most of your life happens on your own land. Purists can dispute that definition, but I find that off-grid is just useful shorthand when trying to explain to city folk how I live. I spent almost a year just camping on my land. This tent was a nice idea, but with the insane winds that pummel this plateau, it was like sleeping inside a drum. This old trailer someone left here was a little more secure, but every night I woke up to mice running across my bed. The first time I set traps, I cried at the sight of their dead bodies. I buried them and made little graves out of stones. It was the same year my dad died, and I was stripped so raw, every small sadness destroyed me. My skin has thickened considerably since then, as just about every day in the wilderness demands some kind of pain and brutality. I've killed over 20 rattlesnakes with a shovel. Finally, in the spring of 2022, I brought in this prefab shed shell. I was so excited I jumped inside it while it was still on the truck and bashed my head on the lift machine, then proceeded to bleed all over it. It was an accurate preview of the shed life to come. I painted bloody runes of good fortune on the walls, but as we'll find out later, I must have misspelled something. So anyway, I finally had a roof over my head, but before I could acquire luxuries like a kitchen sink, I had to build out the interior of this bare wood box. I spent that entire year giving flesh to those bones. I had a pro handle the electrical, and with the well pump powered, I finally had my own water after months of hauling it up from a campground down in town. the sight of that water, my water, gushing out of the spigot was a transcendent experience. It was like watching the heart start pumping, flooding my home's dry body with life. The next step was to add some fat, the insulation. Staying warm wasn't an issue yet, but noise was. When the wind started raging, I could hear every creak and groan, every branch flinging against the wall. I did not feel safe. Also, believe it or not, I had a lady visitor during this era, and with nothing between us and my neighbors but half an inch of plywood and a few hundred feet of open prairie, well, they heard things. So I insulated the shed with mineral wool, which is the warmest and most soundproof material available. It gave me flashbacks to the years I spent as an HVAC installer. Wrapping fiberglass around ducts was one of the worst parts of the job. But although itchy and sweaty as hell, it was actually kind of fun. It feels like cutting cake. I learned how to plumb with PEX, which is also kind of fun. Takes me back to the Legos of my youth. And I even ran a drain line to this old barrel, which serves as my kitchen gray water tank, since my actual $12,000 septic system is down below at the site where my actual house will go if I ever get, money and stuff. I decided to bring in the pros again for the drywalling because that's just too arcane of a trade for DIY dabblers like me. And when they were done, behold, the monster had skin. It was now finally time to start building some creature comforts. This is where my woodworking adventure began. I had never done much building. In fact, all of this stuff was new to me. I grew up poor in the country and I was no stranger to hard work, but for most of my adult life, I'd been a silk-handed city boy who just threw money at problems, and I hadn't had a need for these skills. Well, now I did. It was time to grow some calluses. So far, I'd been living out of boxes in a state of constant disarray. I craved storage and organization. I built these shelves in a kitchen island out of cheap construction lumber, and it amazed me how nice it cleaned up. With a few coats of polyurethane, it looked beautiful. So smooth, so sensual. Sorry, what was I talking about? Right, shelving. I also built what I can only describe as a closet, also with construction lumber. I even used it for door trim. I really love how this stuff looks when it's sanded and sealed. It's so thick. I installed a cheap IKEA kitchenette, connected the water lines, and it's alive! I've finally had running water indoors. I can't even explain how blissful that was after so many months of doing kitchen chores outdoors in the wind and the wasps. The moment that faucet turned on was the moment this shed became a home. Of course, it was only cold water, which became a problem later on, but for now, bliss. I bartered some flooring store copywriting for this choice vinyl plank. Then I elevated my bed to make an apartment for Bob and a little extra storage. And with that, it was finished. And not a moment too soon. I was literally putting in the last 2 trim boards when the snow started falling. I raced to put away all my tools before they got buried, and then I bunkered down for the winter, which turned out to be the worst winter in 20 years, according to all the locals. The snow kept falling for months. My neighbors plowed out my driveway 5 times, and I still ended up trapped for weeks in a white void of endless ice. I really wished I had installed a water heater, as there's nothing quite like the misery of washing dishes in ice water, smearing cold grease around the plate while your fingers go numb. But after the spring thaw, I finally put one in. I installed the breakers and ran the wiring myself this time, in addition to the plumbing. Ugly as always, but it worked. Hot water in the shed. A true miracle, the final touch for a shed life well lived. And that brings us to today. This is my life. I wake up next to Bob, I slide over the edge of my tall bed into the tiny gap between bed and desk. I make coffee and breakfast in my very tiny kitchen. I pee off this rock and I poop in this bucket. And every few days, I dump this bucket into that bucket. I take showers when I do take showers with this little propane camp shower thing, which gets me about 20 seconds of heat before the faintest breeze blows the flame out. What did I do last winter? My neighbor was nice enough to let me use his yard shower once in a while, but mostly I just took whore baths. I plan to build an actual heated shower enclosure here and connect it to my water heater inside, but I plan a lot of things. I am building an outhouse, and it will be magnificent. But for now, Home Depot. It's how doers get more done. Let me say it clearly, this was not the plan. I did not buy this land to spend the rest of my life sawing and hammering an infinite queue of projects while cramming my 6'3" body into a 10 by 13 foot box. The plan was to build a modest house down there on the actual building pad with the actual septic system and actual privacy, and use this as a storage shed/guest room. But I plan a lot of things, and reality rarely complies. I miss my mind life. I spend so much of my time and energy on physical survival work, there's just not much left for lofty pursuits like writing novels or even reading them. I can't even manage a movie or a video game these days. I'm too exhausted to veg out. These videos are the only creative work I've been able to handle lately because I can do them in tiny pieces when I'm taking a break from the dust and toil. And also, I guess, because they're about the dust and toil, and there's some catharsis in that. It'll be a long time before I ever have a home where I can cook more than one ingredient at a time and I don't bump into everything like a giant in a dollhouse. But soon, I'll have a bathroom, kind of, and then maybe a shower. And then it'll be winter, and I'll be forced to put away the tools and go inside for a while. And maybe by the time the ice thaws next year, some things will have changed in my life. Maybe there'll be a more hopeful path for my creative career, and this will all get a little less grim. But until then, shed life.